Well, in the same vein, then, storyboarding versus comic writing, also screenwriting versus novels. You said you took the class. Some of it's helpful, not much was helpful. What was probably what was one of the biggest things you had to learn going to novel writing from screenwriting? Was it filling in the description or not description, but interiority of characters or something? I don't know.
It was about, when you write a screenplay, everything is very face value. John walks through the door. That's all you have to. There's no emotional. Any emotion comes through the dialogue. And ironically, when I did my first trilogy, it was a sci-fi horror. So there was lots of description. I really got into the heads and really got into the smells and the senses and all the things that could bring in anxiety to both the characters and hopefully the reader. And then Shelley is the complete opposite. Shelley has very little description. Shelley is much more dialogue based. I think there's one paragraph in the whole book where they're driving through DC at the beginning where I do describe a little bit what it looks like. And then after that, it's just, I lean on the dialogue to explore the world, and I have minimal description. So I got more confident about cutting down some of the description as I went. Also, there were different genres. One's a detective sci-fi. The other's a horror sci-fi. So horror, you want more meat on the bone, and mysteries, you want to keep it snappy and keep it moving.
Now, let me clarify the timeline here. You wrote Shelley during 2020 COVID lockdown, or was it the ship?
I wrote the ship during the ship.
Okay, gotcha.
But I had started Shelley in 2017 to be my first book. I got 50 pages in and I stopped. And those 50 pages more or less are pretty close to what was in the book. I changed a few scenes, but generally those pages did make it in the book. It just, I dug them out after doing the trilogy. And the reason I got into, I always knew I was going to do Shelley after I did this trilogy. But when I was finishing Children of the Ship was when you started to see all this stuff on the news about, pronouns and stuff. And I started thinking, well, how would a machine identify itself?
Yeah.
Because it's built to look like a human woman, but it probably considers humans kind of inferior. So it's like, it would probably consider itself an it. And I thought, so the opening line of the book, Shelley, an it, not a she, stood in a vast wheat field staring at a farmhouse. That opening line came to me. I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go because now it's topical.
Yeah.
And I believe I've done a good enough job that I've had both conservatives and liberals like it because it doesn't have a point of view about today. It does use that concept of that I wouldn't have had a few years ago. I never would have thought 5 or 6 years ago of, well, how would a machine, because Data was called a he, and this and that. So I thought that added a little extra dimension to it,
Yeah, it does what I think good fiction should do, which is take any issues or whatever that might be in the ether and then recontextualize them. Don't argue one way or the other, but recontextualize it in this new format that we can explore and so it does a great job with that, definitely. I shudder to think though what the centipede like sex bot would identify as.
The point of this, so for those of you who don't know, because I am assuming the vast majority of people watching this haven't read Shelley yet, there is a scene in a sex club, and in it, I take things to the most extreme possible because my idea was, can you imagine if they really did have robots like this, how far they would take it? Because the normal vanilla sex that we think of or anything like that would probably be gone within the first 24 hours. It'd be like, how far can we take this? So there is this like centipede type creature that's going through the audience of the strip show with all these different sexual organs attached to it. And it's kind of titillating the audience as they're watching a strip show or something. And the idea of that was just to show how extreme this was getting. And that was actually the only like a adultish scene in the whole book. But that was in my and I thought, I should keep that because I thought it was a good example of, because most of the book is so much about the detective mystery that I thought it was good to show on the fringes just how extreme, some of these elements have gotten with machines and stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't say that. I shouldn't have. I don't want to make anybody think it's an adult-oriented book, like in that respect or anything. But it struck me because I told Sound Engraver too. I was like, that is exactly what would happen as soon as the technology is available. We'd have furry bots. We'd have all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And Shelley is. I mean, you guys, those of you who listen to my channel for a while, know I did the review. I loved it. It's got you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I think it could be described as having elements of cyberpunk in it. It is a future. It's not crazy different from our future, but it's different enough to be a good science fiction future. We got technology that we don't quite readily have available. So yeah, no, it's a great detective story, great detective mission. You want to know these characters, and you've got to start with the book Shelley. We're going to talk a little bit about Murder Mind at the end, the sequel to Shelley that's coming out in the summer, but you really have to start with Shelley. So you want to go ahead and buy your copy now from that link that Sound Engraver is dropping in the chat or the description below. It's an easy read. It's a fun read. Great summer read too, I think. So yeah, check that out so you can be ready for the sequel. But
that's very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But first, we should say something about the ship, though, because this is a big endeavor, this trilogy, and I wanted to read the third one so badly before we did the interview, but I wanted to reread Shelley first just to have it fresh in my mind. So I've read the first two, and this is a big endeavor. Now, I did hear somewhere that you were, I think it was on the Good Bad Flicks, that you were a big X-Files fan back in the day. And where did we kind of know where the Shelley idea came from these other projects? Where did the idea of the ship, the kind of sci-fi horror epic story, come from?
Well, it was my first book, and I thought, I should keep it pretty contained. Shelley was not contained. Shelley was Shelley's about a senator gets killed in the middle of Washington, D.C., and they're not sure if it's a synthetic or a human did it. So that automatically, that one line premise brings in all kinds of politics and all kinds of world building. And so I wanted something much more contained. And I had another idea for a project called The Ship. And it was trapped inside a UFO, about somebody trapped inside the UFO. Basically, you have two groups of people. You have those that are trapped inside the ship and those outside the ship trying to get in. And I thought that would be easier for a first book to keep it more contained. Sure. And then it did keep growing as I went, but I kept it, I think, relatively contained.
Sure,
obviously, the saga continues from there. But the big influences for that book were Michael Crichton's Sphere and Stephen King's Tommyknockers, which I didn't love. And I'm a big Stephen King fan, or especially his early work. And I feel that you can learn for other writers. You can learn a lot from writers that you love when you're like, they dropped the ball. They didn't quite make it. Stephen King thinks Tommyknockers is his worst book. It's not. That's like Steven Spielberg saying Temple of Doom is his worst movie. It's not. It's not even remotely close, dude. It's like so far from your worst, not even close. It's actually my favorite of that trilogy. But Tommyknockers, I saw, well, I wish he'd done this, or I wish he'd done that. And a great way to start a book is, I wish he'd done this. What if we did this? What if we did this is a great way to start. And so I incorporated some of those ideas. So that's how that trilogy started.
Yeah. Now you had the idea and you went with it. I was going to talk about the writing process. Some people always ask, where do you get your ideas? Generating ideas, and as a writer, they're always there. Everybody has ideas. They come through. It just depends on what idea you kind of want to fixate on for a while. But you go from idea. What makes an idea story worthy for you? Do you have to have sort of a hook and a narrative idea that comes along with it? Because I get ideas as a short story writer. I get really cool ideas all the time, and I think, I'd love to do something with that, but I don't have the story yet. Does that come to you at the same time, or does it come in different phases? How does that work with you?
I have to beat it out, and by that I mean I have to figure out the beats of it and see if it's got enough meat on the bone. Like I knew what originally my third Shelley book was going to be, and I started beating it out. I'm like, this isn't going to work. It was going to be an undercover story, and I was like, man, there's nothing happening for the first 100 pages. It's like people are going to fall asleep. So it just didn't work. I really wanted to do that. I thought it was a clever idea that I had for it, but it wasn't going to work once I started beating it out. So I figured out another storyline, and then I looked at the beats for that, especially the first half. When I'm planning a novel, I never write an outline for the whole book. It's too daunting. I was going to ask about that. So what I do is I outline to the midway point. The midway point is everything. And that's where the story completely changes. And let me give the viewers a couple of examples in case they want to be writers. So remember Aliens? The first half of that is finding out what happened to the colonists. That's really the whole story of the first half. Yeah, you got the Ripley things going on, but it's basically what happened to the colonists. Midway point, colonists are dead, aliens show up, most of the Marines are wiped out, and then the second half is a completely different story. It's like, we got to get out of here. How do we get off the planet? That's a sequel. It's a different story. Original Star Wars. The first half is about finding Princess Leia. Midway point. Hi, I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you. The entire second half is about escaping the Death Star. Even when they're trying to blow it up, it's because it's coming to destroy Yavin. They're trying to escape it. So those are two different stories. So if you approach your book not like I have to write 350 or 400 pages or whatever your book length is going to be, but I have to write half that, oh man, your job just became a whole lot easier. And it makes your midway point that much more impactful. It needs to either be a false success or a false defeat. False because it's not over. But it needs to be one of those two things. And your whole first half is building up to that moment. So what I do is I outline to that point, and then I say, okay, now I've really screwed my characters over. Let's see how they get out of this. And it doesn't always work completely smoothly. Like on my new book, it's a 350-page manuscript. The last 120 pages were thrown out after I read the rough draft. I knew it wasn't even working when I was writing it, but I was like, let's complete it, get it done. That's another piece of advice I would give is get it through to completion. But then I threw out the last 120 pages. I knew exactly where to cut it. I kept everything before then, didn't change anything. But the last 120 pages had to go. It originally ended in Miami, and it had this whole like Miami Vice thing that just didn't work at all. I don't know. Maybe I'd been watching. Maybe I was listening to Phil Collins. I don't know what happened.
Nice.
But what was great about it was as soon as I read it the wrong way, I knew exactly what the right way was. Mm-hmm. So I had no hesitation to hit delete and then rewrite the 120 pages. And if you're not ready to do that, then you're not ready to write a novel because you got to be willing to, cut what's not working.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that even as a short story writer, but yeah, definitely.